Season 1, Episode 7, Roy, A Life Well Lived.
Ladislav Nova.
Spiritual Pizza Slices with Buzz Coastin. Brought to you by BuzzCoastin.com. Go there for more information. For over 20 years now, I have walked the earth, met people, and got in adventures. Now, fast approaching my dotage, I'm releasing an eclectic mix of trippy memorabilia that I collected while walking the earth. This first season of Spiritual Pizza Slices will offer audiobook chapter mashups with some backstories about the stories. Hope you enjoy the flashbacks from my trips. If you like this kind of thing, be sure to subscribe and tell your friends. And if you don't like it, well, be sure to tell your friends. And thanks for listening. Spiritual Pizza Slices with Buzz Coastin.
You sold a gun to a murderer so you could play video games?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you spend all day shuffling words around, you can make anything sound bad, Morty. Here, check this out.
Roy, what's wrong?
I had a nightmare. I was with an old man. He put a helmet on me.
It's just a fever. Get some sleep. I don't want you missing school on Monday.
Shit! Oh, what the hell? Where am I?
55 years. Not bad, Morty. You kind of wasted your 30s, though, with that whole bird-watching phase.
Where's my wife?
Morty, you were just playing a game. It's called Roy. Snap out of it. Come on.
A few years ago, I wrote a story about Roy for my book, Spiritual Pizza. And that is the story that follows this incoherent ramble. And when I heard about Rick and Morty's Roy, A Life Well Lived, I checked it out on YouTube, and it was way cool. It's a great metaphoric explanation of the video game simulation theory, so popular now in this video game age. But it's probably closer to the truth than we can imagine. And it's worth watching. Season 6, Episode 2 of Rick and Morty, take Roy to the next level. Is life a video game? I doubt that's literally true. But life does have some odd twists and turns, don't it? Like Roy. Roy was ending his career as a Kalalau outlaw just as I was joining up. I'm going to tell my story about Roy next. So sit back and relax and enjoy Roy's Life Well Lived. I met Roy on a beach one day, and it went something like this. Roy, A Life Well Lived, May 2003.
Ho'o halal, ika haleapia, ina maka maka.
Fill up the house with friends. Early one morning as I was paddling out the KA, I heard the Ranger copter Little Red overhead. Looking up, I saw it was headed in the wrong direction. Red didn't normally fly out that way, and it was the wrong time of day, too. That made me wonder if Red wasn't carrying Ikaika out to the Hall of Justice in Lehue. And indeed, it was. Ikaika was one of 2 Native Hawaiians living in Kalalau Valley at that time. Ikaika was the only outlaw tagged and flown out that day. But Ikaika was not technically an outlaw. He was asserting his legal right to live in Kalalau Valley per the stated government's constitution. Nonetheless, Ikaika was treated like an outlaw by the DLNR, Department of Land and Natural Resources. Ikaika had been called into Kalalau Valley by the Aumakua to be their kahu. A kahu provides care to the Aumakua and their heiau. And the Rangers worked for the people who had stolen Hawaii from the Hawaiians. That's the syndicate I call the stated government. The Rangers were enforcing the stated government's orders to harass Ikaika. You can draw your own conclusions about all that, and you can read about his legal battles in Section 3. Now, let's get back to the fun part. From Ikaika's elevated vantage point, He saw that I was too far away from the rocky coast to benefit from the current flowing north towards Ka. That current flows along the coastline and is about 4 feet wide. Ikaika discussed this with me after he got back from the Huskal. Later, we would kayak out together, and he would school me in Hawaiian-style ocean kayaking. But that's another story coming up in the big paddle party. And Ikaika will appear again at the end of this story about Roy's life well lived. Heath's kayak. A kayak would be quite helpful to me if I was going to spend several months in Kalalau. However, I was not sure there would be one for sale in Kalalau when I got there. As luck would have it, Heath was on his way out to the mainland to learn how to drive big trucks. He was also wanting to sell his big white whale of a boat. Heath's kayak, the White Ghost, was more like a barge than a kayak. A supply boat it was, matey. Thanks to that kayak, I would not have to hike out and lug the heavy supplies back in. Instead, I only had to paddle the kayak a mere 5 nautical miles to Ka. Once at Ka Beach, and after a quick shower at the bathrooms, I would hitchhike to Hanalei and back. After which my kayak would be loaded with supplies, and then I paddled back to Kalalau. Good exercise, and a chance to get a brief whiff of civilization too. Welcome to Roy's World. Ka Beach has a tranquil view of the reef and the ocean. That was where some outlaws were talking story and sipping beers when I returned from Hanalei. Some of them had been on the outs for a while, and a few were working at Pierce's place nearby. Among those beachcombers was a guy named Roy, a longtime outlaw according to the introduction. And unlike some in our group, Roy was not controversial, and that was so very Roy.
During the usual banter involved with first meetings, I discovered Roy hailed from Seaside Heights, New Jersey. Well, while in high school, I worked on the boardwalk as a barker in Seaside Heights, New Jersey. And Seaside Heights was very near Toms River, New Jersey, where I had lived for 8 years. That was where I went to high school.
So I asked Roy about high school, and he told me that he had graduated from Toms River High School. Fucking A, man. Me too. So I asked Roy what year he graduated, and he said it was 1969. Unbelievable. I was part of the class of 70. How about that? TRHS and New Jersey representing in the Valley, brah. Jersey is always representing somewhere. Roy, a life well lived. This kind of synchronistic meeting happens a lot in Hawaii. But here's where the story gets very Kalalau. Roy told me that we were not the only TRHS grads to go off the grid in Kalalau Valley. According to Roy, there were 5 of us who had stayed in Kalalau Valley from the TRHS classes of 69 and 70. That seemed unbelievable. To prove this, Roy recited the names of our classmates and fellow outlaws. Names I had heard of, but people I never interacted with in high school. Roy and I didn't know each other back then either. Our graduating classes had about 700 students each, and with those class sizes, it would be unlikely to know everyone. However, I knew the names of the people Roy told me about, but Roy's name I had never heard before. One of our classmates was Guitar Dave Cassis, who had been a star wrestler at TRHS in 1970. Dave had a reputation for being quite a character in Kalalau, which does not in any way correspond to my vague memory of Dave from high school. Roy also said that in addition to Dave, there was Tom Brown, the survival book guy, TRHS 69. According to Roy and Ronnie, Tom pronounced Kalalau too easy for survival training after only a few days there. And Tom now has his own Wikipedia page. Our other classmate was Gary Jobson, TRHS 69, and he has his own Wikipedia page too. According to Roy, Gary had also spent time in Kalalau as well. And I knew Gary by name only. By the way, neither Roy, Guitar Dave, nor I have Wikipedia pages yet. In recalling this event, I have tried to imagine my classmates' surprise at meeting Roy in Kalalau. and I have tried to imagine the surprised looks on their faces when Roy recited the names of the other TRHS classmates. And I wondered if they were as surprised as I when they discovered Roy went off the grid in Kalalau long before any of us. It's not clear to me which TRHS alum was the first to arrive after Roy, nor do I know what order they arrived in. However, I do know that I was the last TRHS grad to live in Kalalau Valley, and thereby meet Roy. That was because my class of 1970 was the last class to graduate from TRHS, so I got that going for me. And I never knew another outlaw that could make a claim similar to Roy's. Even outlaws born on Kauai cannot name 4 of their high school classmates who lived in Kalalau Valley as an outlaw. I think Waimea High School can claim only 3. Once again, more Roy. Roy was also part of a manifestation trick Ikaika did just a few weeks after I had met them both. Ikaika had this thing for Guinness Stout. Maybe a week or so after meeting Roy, I walked into Ikaika's camp by the river crossing. He was sitting cross-legged facing the ocean. He said he was calling in some Guinness Stout, at least 2 bottles. Man, I like the way this guy thinks. Ikaika looked over at the heiau and said, "I can see my brother coming across the heiau, and with the Guinness." So I looked towards the heiau, but it looked deserted to me. Ikaika continued to stare at the heiau and would repeat that phrase from time to time. While we sat and talked, Ikaika was telling me about how good the beer was going to taste, and that it would be ice cold when it arrived. Sure sounded good to me. A period of time went by, and when I looked again, there was something bobbing towards us. Soon my eyes were seeing Roy's head slowly nodding into focus. Then I saw that Roy was carrying something about the size of a bread box. And when Roy arrived at Ikaika's camp, we opened the box and there were 3 big bottles of Guinness Stout on ice. Roy had kayaked them in from KA just for Ikaika. Ta-da! Roy continued to kayak in and out of Kalalau Valley while I was there in 03. And later I heard he had returned to Jersey in 04. Roy and I didn't hang out a lot in Kalalau, but he was a guest in my camp more than once. Roy, if you're still out there, give me a shout out, brah, and let me know if the mana is still everywhere.
Hope you enjoyed your slice of spiritual pizza. If you can't wait for more, the audiobook is on sale for $9.99 at buzzcoastin.com, and that's the last time I'm going to tell you about it in this podcast. Or you can subscribe and wait for the story to unfold, and be sure to tell your friends about the Buzz. Thanks for listening.
Holy shit! This guy's taking Roy off the grid! This guy doesn't have a social security number for Roy!
Outro. This podcast is a message in a digital bottle. Thanks for picking it up. You can connect with me using buzz@buzzcoastin.com. You can also find more about my creative efforts at buzzcoastin.com. If you like this podcast, be sure to tell your friends. And if you didn't like it, be sure to tell your friends. And thanks for listening.